when you look at the education system in America, like I don't think we teach the right things. We teach history, we teach science, we teach math. We teach nothing about like nutrition. We teach very little about saving money. We take like financial like wisdom. Like we don't teach any of those things. In managerial
How to
training,
open a beer bottle when you don't have a beer bottle opener. Like
sure.
you can use your teeth, the top of a door.
Yeah, that would like I actually do that at home. I don't actually use a bottle opener whenever I open Topo Chicos. I try and open with everything else and just learn. It's fun. It's like a
Just to
game.
annoy the shit out of your wife.
Oh, it's great. Like,
Fantastic.
why are you using that plate? I'm gonna see if I can
Yes.
open a.
Every high school kid should learn that.
That's great.
You're listening to Let Me Speak to a Manager with Frank Cava and Ian Mathews.
What a crock of shit.
Yeah, that was hot mic, Sam.
You can't say God here.
Don't worry, nobody's listening anyway.
Do it live! I'll write it and we'll do it live!
Frankie!
Ian, you son of a bitch.
Frankie, it's come to that time where we've got to talk about your performance on this podcast. And I've got a tough decision I'm going to have to make in the next couple months. So I'd like to give you a full chance to really improve your performance, pick it up as a co-host, be a better.
Let me make this easy on you. I quit. I'm not going to quiet quit. I'm not going to do anything else. I'm just going to tell you I've had enough.
That's it.
That's fine.
I'm
Good
out.
luck. I'm
out.
going to leave now.
I will tell you this, though. If that were to have happened, that is exactly how I teach people how to fire people. Convince the other person to wave a white flag and just give up.
You got your wish, Ian. You got your wish.
You don't need to get HR involved. We don't need any paperwork. I don't need to put you on a performance plan. There's no writing here. You're going to give me your notice. You can't sue me because you quit. Everything is fantastic. That is an ideal approach that just happened. For our listeners, that's how you fire someone. You just get them to throw in the friggin' towel. Go find another podcast to be a co-host of. So we today are going to talk about what I would consider to be the biggest fear of every new manager. And that's all I do is work with new managers. So I know just how terrifying it is for people. The concept of firing another person, taking their job away from them, looking them in the eyes and saying, you can't work here anymore, you've not performed well, is enough. That fear is enough to keep a lot of people from ever putting their name in the hat to be a manager. I'm sure you've heard it, Frankie. You go talk to someone, you say, I think you'd be a great manager. No, thanks. And you dig and you peel that onion long enough to figure out why don't you want to do this? And one of the answers I always hear is I wouldn't want to get into the firing and the hiring, but it's really the firing, the looking when the rubber hits the road, me and you in an office, you're fired, today's your last day. That moment is so gut-wrenching to some people that they never applied to be a manager in the first place.
I don't know if that was a handoff or that was another firing. But
he's not the best color man in the business for nothing, folks.
I think firing, I think there's other things that scare people about management, because when you manage, you no longer do. You have to use your know-how of do, and you have to corral and motivate and do other things. But the firing process is part of it. So we talked Q4 of 2022 about, we thought there was going to be a lot of firings that were going to happen in just the marketplace. And right now it feels like we are partly right. Big tech is certainly firing people. Fortune 500s are firing people in huge numbers. But the economy is reacting in a way where they're still hiring people. The small business is still hiring. The last jobs report was actually really positive with hiring. So it's this weird place in the economy from the standpoint of what's happening kind of in the macro. But I think what you're going to find is companies who are well run are properly staffed. Companies that are not well run aren't properly staffed. And right now what they're doing is they're hiring in reaction because people are available. So what I think we're going to talk about today.
You also have a dichotomy going on right now, Frank, in the jobs market, in that high paying jobs, big white collar jobs are shrinking, And a lot of the jobs getting created are in the service sector. They're not as high paying. They're a little more blue collar. So you have this dynamic of people that kind of quit working for a couple of years during COVID,
Yes.
are not getting benefits anymore. They're back out looking for jobs. They're looking for work. Restaurants are able to find a little more people, hotels. That whole industry is growing. And when you start losing all those tech jobs, though, you're losing $250,000 jobs. That's why San Francisco real estate is plummeting.
Yep.
But all of that money trickles through the economy. So they'll spend less when they consume less. Other people will lose jobs down. It all trickles down. Sorry,
Correct.
I'm just jumping in for a piece.
No, it's fine. All that is in fact the case, but I think what we're going to talk about here today is the hardest type of hiring, the hardest type of firing decisions. Like when you move into a managerial role, and Ian and I have been doing this for a couple of decades at this point, so it's not like we're new to this. Sometimes decisions to let people go are pretty easy. Like you get people who kind of fit into the category of they're not good performers and they got really poor attitudes. They don't fit into the mission or the culture. Like those are the people that are the easiest to fire. The people that we've had to let go recently are performers. Like I use a scale of 1 to 5. 1 is unacceptable. 2 is there's unsatisfactory, and then there's meet standard.
I would think most of our listeners understand a 1 through 5 sliding.
Yeah. So like 3s, 4s, and 5s is where you want to be, right? Like 3s is you're barely getting by. 5s are great. Stated simply, 4s make you money. Anybody who's a 3 or a 4 makes you money. A 5 makes you a ton. So as a business owner, you have to look at that perspective. So if you have someone who's a 4, but which I had, and they're acting in a way that doesn't fit in or doesn't promote cohesion or promote unity within your team, these are people that you have to eventually let go. So Ian and I kind of got into a conversation around like, how do they fit? How do you
determine when it's time to fire someone? I think that's really what we're like. That's the hard choice of you work with them, you coach them, you spend some time. When is enough? When do you make the decision? And
how do you
rank them?
When and how do you fire them? 1, and 2, how do you explain it? Because in some instances, people don't see the real reasons why you're going to let someone go. To their expectations, to someone who only touches them a couple of times a year or just sees them in the hallway, these are really nice people who seem to be doing a great job. And you have to explain away the reasoning so other people don't freak out or leave or worry about their job satisfaction.
Who's the first person you ever fired? Not laid off, fired for performance, not a lack of work is simple. That's easy to explain to someone. And you're normally kind of forced into that by your company.
I don't know if I ever had one of those, Ian, because at Ryan, at NVR, we didn't really fire people. We more did riffs, or I can remember doing performance management, like telling people like, here are the 6 reasons you're not doing a great job, but we never really fired. Like
you guys were soft as hell at the home builder. I'll tell you, I came in there with a friggin' chainsaw. I was in there. I was chainsaw Al Dunlop. I was just getting after it. I mean, I came in with a can of gas and a match, and I was just lighting that bad boy on fire.
Well, the reason for it is you had a different upbringing. You came from GE where they always fired people.
Also, I had a very different mandate when I started.
Yeah.
I came in with a mandate of this is a very broken company. So if I'd have come in as an executive after being told by the CEO, you're coming in to fix a broken company, and 1 year later, I kept all of the same people, I would have been a jackass. Like, how do you fix something by keeping everyone? So you're right. At the time, Ryan Holmes was performing really well, the home building operation, and you didn't have enough people, so no one was firing. I was firing from month 2. I was pushing people out the door. I was force ranking. I probably maybe 30% of the team that I inherited were still there 2 years later. I mean, I burned through a lot of people because they had hired poorly, or they had people that just couldn't accept change, which was my mandate by the CEO to go drive change if you can't get your arms around it. So and you're right, at GE it was 10% every year. So the first guy I had to fire, it's embarrassing it took me as long as it did. We had a guy who literally
This is something we can bond over, not who we fired, but the embarrassment of how slow it was the first time. Because getting over that hump and realizing you got to have a hard conversation with somebody about their performance and they don't deserve to be there anymore is something every manager must face. And it's incredibly difficult to do that the first time.
Yeah. One of my best friends, a guy that was a manager with me, is Macaulay, and Mac and I both got promoted into the job at the same time. And we both have kind of a similar story in that we had a soft spot for a lousy salesperson. We both had it for a different reason. But my guy, his name was Al, and he was probably in his mid 60s when I started. And I think my first management job, I was 24 or 25 years old. I was younger than his kids. Let's put it that way. And the reason I had a soft spot, Frankie, is I kind of learned how to sell. I learned the ropes from guys like Al. Like I remember he was in.
You've talked about him before.
He was in Cincinnati or Cleveland, one of those two cities in Ohio. And I had visited him multiple times, and he had taken me to see a lot of customers and showed me the ropes, was really kind to me. I think I met his wife. He brought me to his house. Like when I stayed there one time, he was really kind to me when I was nothing. I was a nobody. I didn't know anything. I was just a college kid. And so then I found myself managing him, and I knew right from the start, he wasn't really doing what I had done as a sales rep. Once I'd grown up and learned how to prospect and cold call and get leads and network. I knew what our guy should be doing, and I knew he didn't do it. He was just holding on, calling on the same old accounts that were dying and couldn't make quota. But I'd spent a year trying to fix him, wasting all my time. And by the time I did it, it was almost the point where I was told by my manager, you got to go do it. Like, Ian, we've talked about it enough. You're firing Al. Like, no more of this. You propping him up. No more. You're not spending time where you should be. So it was almost a performance discussion for me that I had not taken action fast enough, swift enough. And it actually, the experience really formed how I thought. So there were two of them. So Mac had an identical situation in Detroit with another guy who was an older guy who was nice. This guy had different issues. He was having marital issues and everything, but he was really nice. Both of them, the common link, super nice, never argued with you, would appreciate coaching, but just never implemented it, couldn't do it, both of them. And when both Mac and I had to fire them, GE's HR was so oppressive, it was awful. They had to be involved in every inch of it. Like the performance plan, they pretty much rewrote it all to where it didn't sound like I wrote it at all. They were so worried about getting sued. And when it came time to fire them, they both knew it was coming because HR demanded to be involved in the meeting, and they wouldn't get their ass on a plane and come out. So they had to call in. Like, just think about how awful that is. So in my meeting, Frankie, I meet with Al and I sit down with him, and he's like, so what are we doing? I'm like, hey, Al, I gotta make a call here real quick. And I'm calling our corporate office, and like, I'm waiting for them to pick up. They don't pick up. So I have to zero out, ask if they can find her. And all the while, Frank, like, think about this. Al's sitting there thinking, well, he's looking at me like, what's going on? I've known him for 5 years now. I've known this guy. And I'm like, I'm not allowed to talk to him like a man. I'm not allowed to have a conversation eye to eye with him. I have to wait for HR to get on so they can listen in to hear if anything goes well. And their big thing was, well, you're young and he's over 60, protected class, blibbity blah. And really, we ended up making him feel like a piece of shit because I had HR on there. They made me read some, like, I never did it that way again after that, even though I was young. And they made Mac do the same thing. So my big lesson there was I waited way too long, at least 6 months too long. And I never again let HR form how I had that discussion. I always had it informally before HR got involved so that they knew, like, this is coming. I'm talking to you eye to eye, and it's my decision, because Al felt like someone else made the decision for me. Even after they got off the phone, he was like, do you agree with this? And I remember I bumbled that too. I didn't really do a great job because I didn't agree with the way HR handled it, but I did agree he had to go.
So I think there's two categories, right? Once you get to being a manager, a seasoned one especially, firing is part of the job. So then it comes down to there's two categories of firing. There's the people who are pretty easy to let go, and then there's the people who are harder. The people who are pretty easy to let go are either shitheads that don't really fit in, or they're people who don't do the work, or a combination of both of those two things. Those are easy. And what we do now, Ian, I've talked about this here, we talked about it privately. What we do now with that is pretty simple. Like the way Ian mock fired me in the beginning is exactly it, right? Like you have a conversation, the person gets to the conclusion, and you say to them, I agree with where you've landed. How do we make this humane? And that's the easiest, cleanest way to do it. And you do it in a way that everybody can kind of agree to. It's a complicated conversation, but if you do it right and you run the process the right way, unpleasant, but the most pleasant it can possibly be, and there's no awkwardness. Do you agree with all of that?
Yes. And I guess before we get into the conversation, I'll be interested to see how you do. Let's play a little what's the old Bob Barker? What was the show where they had to
Price
guess?
is Right?
Price is Right. So maybe it's not Price is Right. What's the one? Family Feud. Family Feud is the one where they have to guess. So I have data with over 200 managers on this of the top 3 reasons why they've waited too long to fire. So I have the top 5 out of my group that I've interviewed. What are some of the reasons why you think managers don't say goodbye? Let's see if you get some points here.
They're afraid to confront them.
Yes. Avoiding uncomfortable conversations.
Okay.
That's number one. That's number one right out of the gate.
I would think on that list would also be fear for what it's going to do to that person personally.
Yes, I would say that that's right. So feeling personally responsible for that employee, I think that would match you. That's actually number 2. So that's, well, this person has a family, they have a mortgage, they putting their personal life ahead of the company's.
Yep. 3 is who's going to replace them, who's going to do their work.
Ooh, that's good. That's number 4, lacking a backfill to replace the struggling employee. You're killing it.
All right, that's 3. I mean, I'm a Hall of Famer at this point. Just tell me the others.
Okay, so number 3 is actually justifying the investment, sunk cost fallacy.
Yep.
We put a lot of time into training this person. Let's just give them a little more time.
I wouldn't have gotten that one because I'm over that.
And number 5 is ego. I'm gonna fix them. I'm gonna fix. I can fix them. Like not wanting to. So I think what that one is, Frankie, and I think this would resonate with you. As a new manager, you look at an employee's failure as yours. If I have to fire this person, that means I'm a shitty coach. I'm a shitty manager. I hired wrong. I'm not good at motivating. I'm not good. So a lot of new managers take it personal when someone's just not a performer. And I think that was a little bit of me I think I had a lot of these with Al, the one I had, but one of them was, I don't want people to think I'm a bad manager. So I should be able to fix Al with enough attention and effort. I can get Al selling again. No, I couldn't. Like Al needed to get Al selling again, not Ian doing it for him. And I think that was a big part of where I screwed up on my first one.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think I would have gotten the 2 that I didn't immediately get because I'm so far removed from being new at this. Like I like optimism and like those things. Those are kind of universals for me at this point. But the fact that new managers would think that absolutely, I understand that completely.
So another question I have for you, Frank, is as an experienced manager, because this is a question I get a lot. Actually, right now, I just had a conversation with a young manager yesterday who's going through my program. And the question that she asked is, how do I know if now's the right time, or how to
hire someone?
What she want to know is, how do I know if I'm doing the right thing? Like in how long do you give a person before you make a decision? And that's a very subjective question, and it probably has a subjective answer. But I'd be interested if someone asked you that question. How do I know if I'm doing the right thing, and how do I know if I've given them enough time?
How do I know I'm doing the right thing with firing someone?
Mm-hmm.
I think the answer to number 1 starts with number 2. If someone isn't clearly communicated to ahead of time that they're not doing the right job, and it's not quantified and broken down for them of what a good job looks like, you aren't properly managing that person. So if you're firing someone and it's a surprise, it's most likely a reduction in force. If it's properly managed, there's communication around it first. The conversation that we had in the beginning of this podcast, or the conversations I've had with people, are not the first conversation someone has had with that employee about their performance, their fit, those types of things. So the way it starts, and how do you know you're giving someone enough time, to me, comes down to clearly having expectations of what the job entails. Does the person have clarity around that? And that usually is a verbal conversation, a couple of verbal conversations. And the verbal conversations, if handled properly, will calibrate that employee and get them performing. But if it needs to be escalated, the next step after the verbal is a written. We had these conversations a couple times in the past, on this date and this date. We talked about these 3 things that you're not doing. And these are the type of things that are effort-based that we think you can fix. It's written. If you have verbal, written, and then you still don't have someone who's doing performance, that is the normal process for having the appropriate conversation for firing. That's how I would handle that. And that's how I would think that that works.
Yeah, that's a very direct approach, a very direct answer. And that's a very experienced manager you're listening to right there, that is confident in themselves and knows what performance looks like and has seen it enough to go through it. One thing I like to do, Frank, when someone asks me a question like that, how can I be confident I'm doing the right thing? How do I know if it's time? I ask a series of questions of people. So when a manager comes to me with that, like all coaching, I usually just ask a lot of open-ended questions, but I'll go through the questions that I typically ask. So do you understand the root cause of the employee's poor performance? Meaning, is it training? Is it skill set? Is it skill or will? Do they have an attitude problem? Do you understand? Were they performing before and the performance fell off? Did something happen in their personal lives? Do you fully understand why they're not performing, and how much of it is they just don't have the talent? That's an open-ended question. Is the employee fully aware that they're failing? Have you been crystal clear, and for how long? So, if Frank and I were having a real discussion on that, that wouldn't have been our first chat. It would have been months of me saying, Frank, come on, man. Like, you're not doing a good job on this. Like we're survey scores are saying that you are scoring terribly on our social media I would have a bunch of data to give him, which I don't have, unfortunately. So I'm stuck with Frank as my co-host. He's stuck with me.
I'd blame Harper.
Exactly. So are they fully aware that they're failing? If you fired them today, would they be shocked, outraged, and pissed off at you? And if the answer is yes, you've failed them. If you're to the point where you're asking me, should I fire them, and you think they'd be shocked to hear our conversation, you're failing them as a manager. That it should not be a surprise.
So it's funny. I didn't think about this until now, but I think it's worthy of bringing up. So when you look at the education system in America, like, I don't think we teach the right things. We teach history, we teach science, we teach math. We teach nothing about like nutrition. We teach very little about saving money. We take like financial like wisdom. Like we don't teach any of those things. In managerial training,
how to open a beer bottle when you don't have a beer bottle opener.
Sure.
Like you can use your teeth, the top of a door.
Yeah, that would like, I actually do that at home. I don't actually use a bottle opener whenever I open Topo Chicos. I try and open with everything else and just learn. It's fun. It's like
just to annoy the shit out of your wife.
Oh, it's great. Like,
fantastic.
Why are you using that plate? I'm gonna see if I can open them.
Every high school kid should learn that.
That's great. But the other thing that doesn't happen in business training is they don't really teach you how to performance manage and fire. They don't. It's an inevitable thing. It's an inevitable part of the business, and there's not training for it. There's so little forward. They almost look at you and say, why didn't you know that you need to fire this person? Or why didn't you know this person? Like, most people have inherent good, and they want to see the inherent good in people. And it's one of the biggest fallacies of new managers is, I can manage this person to better performance. But why aren't you taught in the very beginning, you're going to confront people who just need to be let go. And it isn't a failure on your part as a manager. It's just part of the job. It's just a normal thing. No one ever had that conversation with me. No one ever explained it. Like, it just kind of showed up in my lap, and I had to come to terms with it on my own. Kind of like how I built my savings account. No one ever really told me about it.
Yeah.
So it's like they're fundamental skills that are missed. And I think it's missed because people don't want to confront, they don't want to confront things that can be nasty or, not positive. But I think you have to talk about that up front.
I also think it's because their manager was never really trained on it.
No one's good at it. No one's got the skill.
They bumble it all the time. Frank, we worked at a Fortune 500 company where the CEO never fired anyone. He sent Madigan to fire everyone for him. He didn't want to do it. It's an unpleasant part of his job. If you were getting fired, Madigan was coming to talk to you. That was it. He had HR was like his time. It was his hatchet man, right? And that's we've talked about. We're very impressed with the CEO, but he didn't do it. It was part of the job he decided wasn't important.
As an example, Ian, the same guy you just mentioned, Madigan. When I was 24 years old, Madigan taught me how to interview. Madigan explained to me stock options. Madigan taught me so many things.
Yes.
And I was very far removed from him. I just had a passing relationship, and he still taught me a bunch. He never taught me how to fire. He never told me the right process. He was the one guy who was so good that the CEO relied on him. He never taught a class. He never taught a course. We never confronted it and said, hey, firing me showing up is the worst possible thing. How do we keep people in the boat? They already work here. How do we talk about performance management? How do we get to a point where we can avoid this conversation? It was never dealt with.
You know what's interesting, Frank? It's really interesting you say this. Week 12 of my management class is how to fire someone. Like, really in your face, how to fire someone. What words do you use? How do you do it? How do you handle it? How do you think about it? When I went and studied all kinds of management classes. I went and studied all the ones online. I looked at all the ones you could pay for before I built the one I had, just to see what's the competition, what do people talk about. It's really interesting you're bringing this up. Firing was almost never in any of the classes.
None.
It was all like, supervision kind of bullshit, soft HR stuff. There was not a lot on this topic. And that might be a reason why a lot of people didn't do it, is they don't really know how to do it. So they hope the person leaves. Anyway, more questions I asked, Frank. Did this person have all the same chances and opportunities as the other people who are performing on the team? So did you give them as much time as other people who were hired with similar skills when they came in? So was it equitable, the opportunity that they had? There's a lot you can delve into on that. Did they have the same resources, the same training? Does the employee demonstrate that they care? What's their actual behaviors? Do they care? Are they trying to get better? Are they actively coachable? And that, I think that goes a long way on whether I have stopped trying with you or not. Is the employee willing to change, or are they not likely to change? Have you at least documented the areas and shared with them the areas where they're not performing, so they know objectively what the problem is? Is the employee negatively impacting the rest of your team? So is their staying with the company bringing down the overall performance of the other 9 people that their peers are in the office? If the employee told you they were leaving, this is one of my favorites. If the employee walked in and gave you notice and said, I'm quitting, would you fight to keep them? Would you ask them why? Would you try to get them to stay? Or would you privately fist pump underneath your desk? Yes, this happened. If the answer is you would not fight to keep them, what are you waiting for? And then, if you imagined your perfect team, would this person be on it? I love that question. That kind of that's the old, are you settling for okay when you really are being tasked with being excellent?
Right.
And would this person's output be simple to replace with another hire? Right? Would it be easy to replace their output production? And then my last one is, are you starting to have pretend conversations with this person in the shower? When I start talking to myself in the shower and Jenny's like, what's that? And I'm like, oh no, I'm just having a conversation with someone that really should have happened 2 months ago. I know it's been too long.
Yeah. So I think those are really, really good things you should ask. There's also the other side of this, which is when you have a performer who needs to go. And like Ian, if I said to you, like you have someone who's performing, but you need to fire them, what does it usually come down to of why that person needs to go?
There's two things that I look for in an employee. Two questions I ask. Are they performing or are they not? And are they a good cultural fit or are they not? And that is not my unique thing. This is very much a Jack Welch, kind of famous CEO of GE. He was big on this. He said, draw an X and Y axis and you got 4 boxes. And they're one of 4 things. They're either performing, culture fit, pay those people, promote them. They are either not performing and not a culture fit. That's a mishire, move fast. They could be not performing, but great culture fit. You might have them in the wrong role, or you should spend some time investing in what the problem is if they've got all the other behaviors you look for. And then there is the top performer who is a bad culture fit for the company. And he was very big on that person's got to go. So I think with that person, Frank, I would still ask the same questions. Does the top performer know that they're on thin ice because of their behavior?
Right.
And that you don't value their performance so much that they have tenure no matter what. So have they been told, I love your performance, I can't stand the way you're getting there. You're driving the team nuts and it's not good for my team overall, and your behavior needs to change. And have you given them that shot across the bow, fired a cannonball over their bow and said, you got to change your behavior? Because I think, look, people do change. People, sometimes you shine a mirror at someone and they're like, wow, people think I'm an asshole. I don't want that. And they change. Normally they don't. Normally they will get better for a while and slip back. But if it continues to happen to where the team is really grumbling and doesn't want to work with that person, I think you have no choice but to move on if you care about your business long term.
So this is something that I think comes about later as a manager. And I talked in the beginning about when do you have these conversations? Sometimes when you have the wrong culture fit, it doesn't really deserve a chance. I'll just be blunt with this. We started a property management division. I had someone here for a while who was the wrong culture fit, but the results were incredible. And I kind of put up with it for about a year and a half. And it was just torturous for everybody else, but we put up with it. We hired a replacement for this person, and about 6 months into their tenure, like it just started going south. But I was no longer a startup. I had 4 other employees in that department where before I only had 1. So I had to make a tough choice before because I didn't have anybody else.
You didn't have the expertise.
And I didn't have people who could do the job.
Yeah.
Now I have a whole department of people and I can look at the head and say, look, this head is just, I can have this conversation. I don't think this person's going to be honest. And if this person isn't going to be honest with me, I can't have an honest conversation with them. And I don't trust them because I've got a lot of data sources that say I shouldn't. So because of that, I have someone who can do the job but isn't a cultural fit. That's the one time where you don't really give a lot of warning. You just have to make a big boy decision as a manager and just say, I've got to pick the whole over the part. And for the whole entire company, this is the right choice because it makes us healthier as a company to eliminate. And it's a very, very hard conversation. These are the ones that really make me, these are the ones where I'm talking to myself in the shower. My wife is like, what are you talking about? Like, I told her this was going to happen. And she's like, these days are still hard for you. I go, yeah, like you're ending someone's job. Like it sucks that hopefully this is one of the worst days this person's ever going to have. Like hopefully they don't have such a tragic life. It's worse. Like these are one of the moments in your life you remember, and it's serious. And when you sit down with someone and you have a conversation to hire them, you don't start with someday I'm going to sit in this room and fire you. That's not where you want to get to.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, you don't.
So when you get there, you got to take it seriously. But this is what they don't teach and train you on. Sometimes you just got to say goodbye. Sometimes you need to do the write-up plan. there, like, I can give you a conversation. This happened 3 weeks ago. There was 3 people I was going to fire, same morning. One person walked in my office and I sat across from him and I just looked him in the face and I said, look, in this folder are your termination papers. I don't want to give them to you. Should I? He goes, you might, Frank. I'm not doing a good enough job. I was like, why are you saying that to me? Like, why? Like, I don't want to let you go, but at this point, this is your last warning. Like, that's it. But this person tries, great attitude, does a good job, and it was just impossible for me to let the person go. But on the other side, it was the performer who just didn't deserve to be here. So, like, what I can say is, I think one of the reasons they don't teach and train this is it's hard. It's very, very hard. And sometimes it's a gut feeling. People are always afraid of getting sued. Like, it's not easy, but this is one of the things that you must do to run a good business or to be a good manager.
So when it comes down to timing, so there's different reasons someone might not be a culture fit. So for me, culture is a collection of behaviors of a collection of people.
Sure.
Right? So it is the norms that are important around here. And the leader sets the non-negotiables. They set them. Like, good leadership is telling people, here's how I expect everyone to behave as a team around here.
Yep.
Here are the things that I expect from you. If you fall out of line of this, we don't need you, because I'm trying to build something here that works. Any good coach would say that, right?
Yeah.
Any good coach would say, no performer is more important than the team. If you get out of line too much on this, I expect you to hustle. I expect you to practice hard. I expect you to pick your teammate up off the ground. No one's too important. And if you do those things, your ass is on the bench or you're off the team. That's good coaching.
Yes.
One area that I think I would move on much faster than just about anything is integrity. If I don't trust you, it's really hard for you to go on a performance plan to get my trust.
Yep.
Because I would just feel like you're going to be trustworthy while you think I'm watching you, and that's it. And I think a really shitty teammate is one that I would move on fast.
Mm-hmm.
One where the whole team just is like, that guy's bad. He's bad for this office. He's not good. So I think those are 2 areas where I would not be patient. I would be surgical and quick.
So those 2 areas were what? Bad teammate,
not trustworthy, no integrity.
So this is where it gets easier. Firing sucks. It's always going to be hard. If it's not hard, you need to quit and go be a shepherd. Like, this is complicated and it sucks. It's awful. But this is what gets easier. If someone fits into one of those 2 buckets, bad integrity, no longer a good teammate, that conversation is easy, because it took so much work to get here, for my company, for any company. If you have someone that's in those 2 boxes, they're disrespecting what it's taken so long to build, and they're disrespecting the other people who work here, that's the easier conversation, because they have to go. It's like, the best example of this is Antonio.
And they made a choice.
That's right.
A choice that got them there. I think it's worth us, you tell your story, but I think it's worth us going to omissions commissions on this, because I think that integrity is a choice. I choose to sign for this customer to hit my bonus for the quarter, even though I know it was illegal. I chose to do something with my taxes that was fraudulent. These are choices that you made. You earned me getting rid of you, because if I keep you now, I am now, in compliance with you. I'm in cahoots with your shitty integrity, and that's going to wear off on me at some point.
That's exactly right. I explain it to you. You'll probably do. Why don't you explain what you think the difference between the omissions and commissions is?
So Frank introduced, we were talking about this today and how the 2 of us look at when to fire and how we teach it. Frank brought an interesting way of looking at it to me. His way of looking at it is there's omissions versus commissions when there's a performance issue. Majority of omissions are usually on the leadership team. So an omission is, I had a lack of resources. I had a lack of tools. My software was broken. My training was lousy. I didn't have available management to help me and bring me along. There's no onboarding program here. Those are kind of omissions by a company. Now, an omission, I also think an omission is just a lack of something. An omission could also be an omission of talent. So Frank and I were joking, if somehow I got a 15-day tryout with the Lakers in 1999, and Coach Phil Jackson was like, look, I need you to box out Shaq, right? I could have all the great cultural and behavioral things that you wanted in the world. I'm not boxing his big ass out. He's knocking me all over the floor. I'm going to the hospital probably if I try to do it. What I would have an omission of is about 100 pounds, 1.5 feet of height, and talent. I would be the omissions. You couldn't put that on the leadership team, Frank, that I couldn't do my job, right? So I would be failing, but the omission would be an innate skill, right? And I think that I'm using an obnoxious example, but Frankie, we do that all the time. We hire someone who just doesn't have the mindset to be a good accountant. They're not organized. They just don't have the skills. You train them all you want. You give them all the tools. They're a bad fit, or they're deathly afraid of talking to people. They're as far on the introverted scale as you can get, and you're asking them to cold call. You're asking someone to do something that is just not.
That's not their nature.
That's an omission too, right? It's not necessarily their fault. I would actually put that on leadership. You did a bad job of selection for the position versus commissions.
Stop there. So with omission, 90% of that is on the company or the leader. So at my company, I take responsibility, and if I didn't do it, 90% of that is on my management team. It's on one of those two things. We hired the wrong person. We didn't give them the right skills. We didn't give them the right tools. We didn't give them the right things. That is an omission.
Yeah, I think that's right. And then a commission to me is a conscious choice. So a commission, if you think about commissions in the standard, commission is it's a mission that's given to you. It's a task, a project, an order that's given to you. And you have the skills, you have the talent, you have the resources, and you chose not to do it. So it could be as simple as our hours are 8:30 to 5. That's when customers walk in the door. We run a bank. I need someone at the teller at 8:30 when the first customer walks in, and you start walking in at 8:45, right? So the mission is very clear. It is a mission that is within your power. Get your ass to work by 8:30 and open the doors and be there for the first customer. But you chose not to do it consistently. So that is a commission. You chose to fail in that regard. The dress code. Frank and I were talking about, I kept coming back to the same movie, Saving Private Ryan. The mission was to go get Private Ryan, bring him back safely, and get him back to mom because his 4 brothers already died in combat. They could have got out into the wilderness. That was the only mission. It wasn't how they did it was up to them. They could have got out there because they were all conflicted in that movie. Why are we doing this? We're losing guys. This is dumb. Why is one man's life more important? They could have chose just not to do it, and they would have all been court-martialed because they didn't follow and go finish the mission, however it was possible. So omissions and commissions. Omissions are largely on the company. Commissions are choices that you're making. Choices to not be a good teammate. Choices to be disrespectful to management, to your teammates. Choices to not, if you're told that you're supposed to be bringing in 20 new leads a week by working the phones, and you're just you're not prospecting. You're only doing 10. That's a choice. You chose not to do what we asked because we've already determined that that's possible. Right? That's right. Other people are doing it. You're choosing. Frank has a salesperson he's had to be very direct with because he cherry picks his leads, and it's driving Frank nuts. And so Frank is saying, hey, buddy, I'm giving you a lot of good leads and you're cherry picking and you're not closing at the same rate you're capable of. That, Frank, would be a commission, right? Because that's a personal choice, which is why you're looking at your commission plans, right? Commission plans to see, am I paying right for the missions that I'm asking for?
Yeah. So I think to kind of wrap this up, it's this. Firing sucks. The best way to not have to fire is to hire the right people, to have the right outline and the right kind of job description to start, for people to be aligned on what is and what is not expected. The commission stuff is the order. That's the company culture. That's what we will stand for, what we won't stand for. These people that we've been talking about today, they treated the customer like shit. They would badmouth him when I wasn't around. Like it was really, really, really toxic. And I don't think me having a conversation with them was going to change the way they felt. It would have just changed when they said it. So it was one of those things that was so deeply ingrained, I just had to say goodbye to it.
And
But
that's
those,
another one where you have to act fast. So like stop that for a second. Most people listen to this work for big companies. When one of Frank's salespeople treats a customer like shit, that's like Frank treating a customer like shit. His name, that they're getting an email from someone at Cava companies with Frank's dad's name in it. We talk about this all the time. That's not one I'm going to put up with too long if I'm Frank. That's not one we're going to have a lot of in-depth conversations of, hey, I want to talk to you about something. It seems like you're treating our customers like shit. I'm not going to have that discussion. It's going to be, I can imagine it was a very blunt, I'm pissed off at you right now. Like this is, I shouldn't have to explain, be nice to customers when you work for a company.
The way this happened, and I'm thinking about it more, I did have a conversation with one of the people. Like there was an incident, and in that incident, there was a recording. Like everything we do is on voice over IP, right? So we have recordings. So we went back in and we looked at the recording, we listened to it together, and it was pretty shitty. And I remember I asked, I said, given a chance to do this again, would you do it differently? And the answer was no. Not, I would probably come talk, and it was just a no. So I knew right then that we weren't aligned and we were never going to be aligned. And it was just time to make a swift decision, which is something you learn with 20 years of management that I probably would have not felt. In 2004, when I became a manager, I wouldn't have felt that way.
And you wouldn't have felt that way when you were a 4-person team, because when you lose someone when you're a 4-person team, it's pain. Like without having the replacement, it kind of shuts you down for a while. You end up doing it. So I do want to say something on this. So Frank let go of someone who was a 4 out of 5, but was bad culturally for the team. What I'll say is that takes way more confidence. And I'm sure if you're listening to me say that, you're like, of course, of course. Well, most people don't do that. Most people don't have the courage to go fire a performer that is not good for the team in the long term, because so many companies measure their managers so short term, quarter by quarter, month by month, and you feel this constant pressure of I've got to perform, that you end up putting performance above all else. But the problem is, Frank, if you were to allow a 4 or a 5, I think they're even more dangerous than someone not performing. If you were to allow a 4 or a 5 to just treat customers like shit and treat their teammates like shit, and then you got up in front of the whole company at your annual meeting and say, hey, look, it's really important to me that we're all great teammates and we treat customers amazing. What are the rest of your employees thinking if you're not doing anything about the ones who make money for you but don't do any of those things?
I'm out of integrity, and I'm most likely going to turn over somebody who's good.
They don't trust you. Yeah, they don't trust you now. Like you're full of shit. You're just empty words.
Yes.
Right. So whatever Frank says, take it with a grain of salt, because as long as you can sell, that's all he really cares about is money.
That's right.
And that's not what you're trying to build. That's not sustainable, right? That's not sustainable. That's sustainable if you're trying to sell in 3 months. That's not sustainable if you're trying to grow a company for the next 10 years. So I think if you're stuck on this, I think one last question I would ask you is, if you're a manager and you're not sure if you should go, I want you to think about my first experience and being forced to go fire Al, which was embarrassing me because I didn't have the guts to do it. A lot of times people think about, well, they've got bills to pay, they've got a family, they've got kids. But if you sit long enough and you let someone not perform long enough, at some point, someone above you is asking the same hard questions that you should be asking about that person. And if you let multiple sit, your performance goes down, you miss quotas, you miss metrics, and all managers are paid on is getting better results, your overhead. If you don't make the company more profitable, faster, better quality, if you don't do those things, there's no point in having a manager in the first place. So you have to understand that if you won't knock on that person's door and make it clear that they've got to get better or get rid of them and find someone better, someone will knock on your door as a manager. And I know that's hard to think about. And the last thing I'll just say on this, Frank, is the manager I was talking to yesterday, she's young and she's never fired anyone. And I said, okay, I'm going to just ask you a question. How long have you been going to this whatever hair salon where you get your hair cut, right? This is something you pay, it's a service you pay for. How long have you been going to the same stylist? About 5 years. Okay. So if that stylist absolutely butchered your hair, just one bad haircut, would you find another stylist? She smiled and said, no, but I would tell her this is really bad and it's got to get better. I said, okay. What if she butchered it twice? So you've now gone 3 months you're embarrassed about how bad your hair looks. It's just bad. Would you go back a third time? She was like, absolutely not. She's like, I wouldn't fire her though. I just would never go back. I would just ghost. So I said, okay. So when it's your money, you give someone 2 chances and you're out 3 months. But when it's the company's money, you're going
your money and it's a direct reflection of you.
Direct reflection. You look silly. It's embarrassing, but it's your money. That's firing someone. That person's livelihood counts on you showing up every month and getting a haircut. You would move that fast. But now we're talking about 7 months of a guy not performing for you, back and forth, up and down, up and down, up and down. But it's someone else's money. So you're tied up in all these other reasons. And I think it's the same with everyone's always like, oh, managers are evil to fire people. But we fire people all the time. It takes like one shitty pizza and I'm never ordering from your pizza place again. When you think about yourself as a consumer, we fire companies on a regular basis. How many?
You just don't use them again.
You just don't use them again. How many bad experiences at a bank do you need before you're like, screw this bank, I'm going somewhere else? Like this happens all the time. But when we become managers, we feel like it's a direct reflection on us now that if we fire them, that somehow we're bad people. But the truth is, it's their fault. Their job is to go get results. They were told that when they started. The contract between an employee and a manager is, you give me a certain outcome and you do it in a way that fits our cultural norms, and I give you money. Like, no different than getting your hair cut, Frank, or ordering a pizza. You give me something of value. I like pizza. I give you money. An employee is no different. There are more laws around it and there's more complications around it, but it's that simple. And it's the employee's job. Once they've been trained and you've been clear and you've set expectations, it's their job to keep the job. It's their job to perform and to do a good enough job. And if they can't, it's not your fault as the manager. It's time to let them go. You've got to say bye, and you've got to find someone. If you can answer that question, would it be easy to replace this person's performance? You have to make that move. You have to. That's how teams win.
I don't think there's really anything else to add to this. Firing is hard, but it's a part of the job. And in the end, it comes down to this. If you're not willing to fire someone for the betterment of the company, someone's going to walk down to your office and fire you because you're incapable of making that move.
And for all of you that are worried because you can't live without Frank and I, we were just playing around. We were just joshing with you at the beginning. I couldn't fire Frank if I wanted. I'm too big of a softie. I would like to see your performance go up a little bit, though. There were a couple of long delays today where you weren't ready for your normal color commentary. So, I want to put it out there that I'd like to see you really raise your game a little bit.
Clearly, please send it to me in an email so it's formal and written.
Frank's like family. That's a whole nother episode. You can't really fire family. I mean, he's stuck with me. I'm stuck with him. That's just the way it is. But hey, if you're stuck with us and you haven't given us a 5-star review, shame on you. Make it happen. And if you're new to us, smash that subscribe button. Frankie, good seeing you, homie.
Share with your friends, and we'll see y'all soon.